Welcome to Meet, Act, and Part, a Masonic podcast hosted by Midnight Freemasons Greg Knott, Darren Larners, Todd Creason, and Bill Hostler. The views, opinions and experiences that are expressed by the hosts or guests as individual Freemasons do not reflect the official position of any Grand Lodge, appendant body, or Masonic authority to which the hosts or guests belong. And now on with the show.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part. This is episode 49, and we're calling it Our Friends from the North, the Wisconsin Badgers. Boy, that's hard for me to say, you know, being a Fighting Illini fan down here in Illinois. But we want to give a special welcome to Victor and Mike, and we'll come back to them in a minute. But as your host, we should introduce ourselves, and I am one of your co-hosts, Greg Knott.
And I'm Bill Hostler.
And I'm Darren Laners.
Well, Victor and Mike, so glad to have you. You reached out to Bill about a program we'll talk about as the episode unfolds here. But again, want to welcome you to Meet, Act, and Part. And we always start out with kind of what's your Masonic bio and some of your background. So why don't I start with Mike and just give us, Mike, some of your Masonic background, some of your affiliations, et cetera.
Well, thanks, brothers. It's an honor to join you. I was raised in 2008, 2009 in Freemasons Lodge number 363 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I later went through all the chairs, became a past master. I'm a Shriner. I'm a Scottish Rite Mason, have served in several officer, board, trustee, and various committee positions in the Blue Lodge and throughout the Scottish Rite. Last year, I was very honored to receive my 33rd degree from the Scottish Rite Northern Masonic jurisdiction. I guess overall, I'd say I'm pretty passionate about Masonry. I kind of look at it as offering the world an example of setting aside some trivial differences in pursuit of a common good, which seems like it fills a huge vacuum in our world right now. And now I currently serve as a membership chairman for the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin. So that's me.
Well, congrats on that 33rd. I was in your class. So I was in
Thank you.
Cleveland there with you.
You were?
Yeah, getting the 33rd also. So we should.
That explains why you look
we share that in common,
familiar,
right? So, hey, it's a small world, especially in
very cool.
Freemasonry.
Well, congrats to you.
Yeah. So, well, as you know, that's quite an honor, and you never quite know why you're picked for those things, but nonetheless, obviously you're deserving.
Very true.
That's what your brethren thought. So again, congrats on that. Victor, you're also up there in Wisconsin. Of course, we say up there when you're in Illinois, like Darren and I are, or Bill's even further south. But give us your Masonic background and what you're doing up there in Freemasonry.
Yeah, so Victor Magnus, raised Master Mason back in September of 2019. So my journey in Masonry is rather young. I'm in Wautoma Lodge 148 up here in Wautoma, Wisconsin, so pretty well central to the state. Last year I served as junior deacon. This year I am currently the senior deacon. At the Grand Lodge level, I'm involved as well. I am a current district membership representative, or DMR, for District 6, which kind of encompasses central Wisconsin. I've got 14 lodges in my district that I make contacts with. And also got selected to serve on the education committee this year for Grand Lodge. So it was quite an honor to be sought out from that. And I'm excited to be here. I listen to you guys every time I see a new episode pop up. So this is exciting for me.
We appreciate anybody that listens to us. You know, sometimes in the interwebs, you wonder, does anybody read it? Does anybody listen? So thank you very much. That, you know, it's always good to get some validation that somebody's listening to these, because we do enjoy putting them on. Well, one of you reached out to Bill, and it was about a program that the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin has, and means of handling inquiries and such for membership. But why don't we talk a little bit broader first? And I think it dovetails right in there, really, the importance of membership. There's been, countless books and articles and podcasts ad nauseum about membership. And okay, yeah, we're in decline. We'll get that out of the way. It's not even really relevant to looking forward, because to me, that's where we got to look. And as I went through your website, the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin website tonight, I love the fact that you're using all the materials, or many of them, from the Northern Masonic jurisdiction. And one of the things that you answer to me is the why. Why Freemasonry? You've got the vision and the mission out there, all front and center for somebody that may be surfing the web and looking around to find out about Freemasonry. So why don't you talk about membership, and then we can sort of transition with Darren and Bill also asking some questions about the inquiry program that the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin has established.
Well, Victor, you want me to? I'll start off. This is the why membership. It's this bummer to hear over the course of several years that we're declining. I'm saying we're compacting. And now that we've got that done, we can expand. So I'm not one to look at the decline as necessarily a negative thing. I think if we talk about when you look at what happened after World War II, there was a handful of brothers a while ago that put together some stats, and they basically sort of pointed out that post-World War II swell as somewhat of a statistical anomaly that came back based off of these world event things. So in that study, they basically said that we're not really different from a percentage of the population as we were well before that. So I don't know how true that is and whether it does us any good. But my attitude to an increase in membership is I want more brothers. I'm having a good time with the brothers that I've got. I'd like to have more of them. And fundamentally, I think that answers for me the why. I don't know, Victor, if you got something.
For me, it was a continuation of my fraternal experience in college. I had a phenomenal experience with the Sigma Chi fraternity, and it was really focusing on developing leaders, and I really enjoyed that bond and that brotherhood. And from there, I was serving in the military, and I knew that as my military career was reaching kind of that end, it was like, well, I'm going to need another type of brotherhood, another type of group of people to be with, and I want to be more involved in my community. I've served at high levels with the military, and here I have the opportunity then to make that impact at home. So I sought Freemasonry out for that reason, and just like you, I'm passionate about it. Got involved at a very young, portion of my journey, and I want others to experience it. I really, truly do. And part of my drive on the program that we do is I was at online inquiry. In episode 47, you guys talked about that online inquiry. And I sent that email, waited a while, sent the second email, I waited a while, I sent the third email, waited a while, never heard anything back. Eventually, I ran into members of the lodge at a Business After 5 event, and I said, hey, did you get my email? And the gentleman's like, I didn't know we had email. So I sat in the dark for a year when I was starting to inquire along my journey, and was left unanswered. And how many men are left unanswered? So when this program was evolving, I was like, I want to be involved. I have been there, and I don't want that to happen. So that's really my why on where I'm at for membership, because there are great men out there that want to be part of a fraternity.
I attended this spring or winter in Grapevine, Texas. The Shriners had a membership and marketing program, and I went down there, and it was very good. But they talked about this very specific topic, and I don't remember the exact statistic offhand. But Victor, to your point, even, there was Blue Lodge inquiries they were talking about. Then they were even talking about beashriner.org website and how few or how poor sometimes the follow-up was. And I think that's what you're going to talk about tonight, you and Mike. So why don't we go from there and see what your thoughts are?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, Greg. So the beafreemason.org, which was largely that combination of the Scottish Rite, North and Southern jurisdictions and the Shriners, they pulled together this program. They created these tremendous assets and these pieces of content and videos that, you're right, we do leverage strongly on the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin website. But the disturbing thing, and I guess the positive thing, is we were putting together this program year before last, and we started trying to figure out the path that we were going to take with this thing. They did a survey. They had sent out tens of thousands across all the jurisdictions. I think they had the 50 states and then a couple neighboring countries that they were pushing out to as well, too. And they cycled back and they interviewed 948 men who completed this national web form during the year of 2020, and 68% of these people were never contacted by a lodge, which is painfully staggering. Now, the almost sadly funny part is that they said, okay, well, that must have been the pandemic and that must have been 2020. So more recently, they went back and they interviewed from last year's, and the number actually got worse by another, 7% or so. So there is this problem of where the lodges aren't following up. And we knew when we were trying to throw together the Wisconsin program that we were going to have to address that from the start, because what we didn't want to do is have some success in getting these leads in by we're doing web advertisement and we're doing Facebook social outreach and we're doing all these different pieces. But if people are faced with the experience that Victor had, hitting either a local lodge or even in the old case, before we had any way of decently tracking any prospective men coming in, then it was going to be a failure. And we needed to know that we could throw a system in and have some accountability and create some follow-up on it. So that was a pretty fundamental piece of what we threw together when we started building the program.
Darren?
I was just going to add, I think it's interesting and also tragic that as an organization, we are trying to recruit new membership. We're always, Grand Lodges, especially here in Illinois, you kind of hear the membership mantra, membership. But I don't know that particularly our Grand Lodge has anything in place other than the Grand Secretary forwarding on online inquiries to the Lodge Secretary. And then that requires that Lodge Secretary to follow up. And I'm betting that that's probably the case in a lot of jurisdictions. And you're going to find where you have lodge secretaries that, quite frankly, I just became an assistant secretary and I had no idea, what really went into being a lodge secretary until I started doing it. And there's a lot of bureaucratic paperwork and such that is part of that job. So I can understand why a lodge secretary may be hesitant to reach out. But I think my broader point is that it just shows that Grand Lodges should be aware of this as an issue. And I guess I'm happy that you guys in Wisconsin have addressed this, because it's something I think that's probably a glaring need here in Illinois.
The arrangement that was in our state before this program followed exactly that, Darren. It was the web form that was there. It wasn't necessarily well crafted. I think they said that they probably got 5 leads per month, and it did go to the Grand Secretary. And nothing. Yeah, we know how the Lodge secretaries, how buried they can be. The Grand Secretary is facing this usually times the multiple of whatever the lodges are in the state. So, but what we were seeing is, it would take a couple, 3, 4, or 5 days before they would forward it to the Secretary of the Lodge. And then, is that a black hole? And did anybody follow up on that? So you may have the experience that Victor had where if you put something in at the state level, it takes a while to percolate its way through. And it might have been something if we were talking about 20, 30, 40 years ago for that to be acceptable. But now if you go to a website to have new gutters and you fill something out and you don't get a response back, at least by the next day, you're gonna lose interest on it. And then the other part of the problem is, if somebody waited a week before they responded on these new gutters, then the urgency that they may have felt or the interest may have waned. And we're rather fickle in terms of our interest level, and we wanted to make sure that we could capitalize on it. What we did at the tail end of ultimately what this is we dressed up the website. We basically hired a company to help us create a more attractive website, and we put a form front and center on there. We do have it wired into a CRM system, HubSpot, which that mechanism isn't necessarily the important part, but the fact that it's creating a record in the CRM system that we're using to follow up is the critical part. That lead comes in and our timer's already starting on it. So we have somebody on our membership committee that is going, oh, hey, they're in this part of Wisconsin, so this is the district. And we knew that we needed some intermediary between having that form get completed and having that routed before it got to the lodge. We know we needed some accountability at a district level to say, hey, secretary, or hey, whoever, you're not reaching out. And this person is sort of stuck in limbo. And part of what we also did on that form is that we upped the ante, right? So we basically put an attestation statement on that form that says, hey, if you're filling out this form, you're a man that lives in Wisconsin, you're at least 18 years of age, you have a belief in a supreme being, you're of good moral character, or whatever. And that's a box. Click the box and press submit. And that too helped. And in the process of doing that, and then feeding through all these various advertising campaigns that we were doing, which we weren't trying to be obnoxious with any of these advertising campaigns. We weren't trying to push a Ford F-150 in front of everybody's face here. But in terms of doing that, we took that 5 a month, and we're up to, I think, over 100. I think on average, each week we're fielding between 30 and 40 leads per week across our state. And no, not everyone becomes a Mason, right? But we're seeing some pretty interesting stuff. And perhaps the most fascinating thing that's come out of that is we ask the question, do you know any Freemasons? Do you know, if so, is it a relative? Is it a friend, or is it none? And the none makes up 2/3 of the people that we're getting to fill out the web form. So these are people that we feel they didn't have a path to Freemasonry. They didn't have the neighbor, they didn't have the friend, the cousin, the whatever that was going to introduce them or set an example of what Freemasonry is. So these are people that either have been wondering, I wonder what this is. We're doing other things across the state to try and draw awareness to it. And if somebody goes to that website, they'll be coached into saying, hey, here, if you want to initiate your journey, press this button and we'll have a conversation.
Yeah. And, Mike, it kind of, what you just described, I don't know what your philosophy is in Wisconsin in terms of like, can you ask somebody to join or that kind of a thing? But in Illinois, we don't, but we have what's called invitation to petition, which essentially is the same thing in my mind. But to your point, you've put together a marketing program and to try to raise awareness of the Grand Lodge to increase the inquiries and such. Did you get any pushback from, I'll call it maybe those with more traditional ways of looking at some of the membership things? Or Victor, feel free to answer either one of you.
I'll start, Victor, with this one because I like to say I didn't really choose to do this job. I was skillfully manipulated into doing this job. And the conversation went as I was saying, okay, look, if I do this, I have some ground rules. One, if I get one guy over the course of the year that's a good guy that becomes a Mason, I'm calling that a win. I don't want numbers. I don't want quota. I don't want to have to worry about how we're pushing things through the West Gate that don't belong in the West Gate. So I'm not going to lower standard. I don't want to do that. And I'm also a believer, and maybe this was probably one of the things that I knew I might accidentally bump some heads on. I'm not a believer of waving a petition in front of somebody's face. I call that hand-to-hand combat in Masonry, and I don't think it's an effective thing. You don't necessarily know the character that's there. So what we wanted to do was to paint a picture to as wide a population of decent, possibly decent guys as we can, and say, we're over here and we're cool, join us or don't. And so we too, Greg, have the, hey, I think you'd make a good Mason, and we kind of drop the hint there. But the thing that is the most fascinating is we started this process on social media, and one of the things that we discovered is we started engaging these conversations with guys that were seeing the content that we were putting on social media. Is I was never asked to be a Freemason, this guy says. I thought you had to get a direct invite to join. I thought you had to be invited by a member. And one of them that we had that just burns in my head is a guy that said, I thought you needed to be invited. I was a demolay many moons ago. So the sad thing out there is they're thinking we have to ask them, and we're thinking they're going to ask us, and here we're wondering why we have an empty dance floor. So at least by getting out and saying, here, we're not going to ask, but we're going to inform, and we're going to give the right message, because the real Freemasonry is different than the crazy thing you're seeing on the internet. And that was really what we wanted to do, was to establish this thing of we want to be more informative and louder than the misinformation and craziness that we're seeing. And we found some really good examples for that. Victor, anything you want to toss in there?
I've had a few lodges that have kind of had a pushback, and that's fine. I mean, I understand it from a military perspective. When higher headquarters gets involved, you kind of just want to ignore it anyways. And what do they know anyhow down here at the lower levels? But after talking with a few of those lodges and explaining that these are men who are knocking on the digital door of Masonry, they are interested. This is a program designed to help the whole fraternity within our state, and then getting our message out and our details about our program, hopefully to encourage others to be able to utilize something similar. And I told a few of the masters that, all I'm doing is talking to an individual. I'm screening them. I'm ensuring that they meet our beliefs. They meet the requirements. Conduct our background check. We verify that, they are a man of good character. We do some of those things up front and pre-screen it, and then we provide them some of our information and things like that for men that are interested, and then we have a conversation. So I might get a lead. I might get a lead on a guy today, and I'm going to email him. I'm going to text him, and I might finally connect with them in 3 or 4 days. And at that point, we open up a conversation, and every DMR, I think, is a little different in some of our process. But usually after about 10 to 14 days, I've had multiple types of conversations with these guys. And some of them right away, I'm like, I want this man in my lodge. I don't even want to send him across the state, And we tell them that once they are handed off to you in your lodge, it's your process. I'm gonna follow up. I'm gonna ensure that you're contacting this individual because they're interested, and I'm not going to leave you alone until I know. And then on the same side, I'm talking to that interested man. Hey, have you heard from the lodge? I know so and so said they were going to email you. Did you receive that email? Is it better for them to text you during a certain time of day that you guys haven't connected? And sometimes lodges get ghosted. Sometimes lodges are a little slow because of who they have assigned to respond. And we've gotten a couple lodges to adjust kind of a membership chairman. They're going to handle those leads that come in now. And once they're there, it's on your time frame. If your lodge has a 6-month minimum before a petition can even be handed, that's up to you. We don't control it at your level. What we're trying to do is provide interested men in your community who look up to men like you. They want to be like you. There's a reason they're knocking on the door. They just don't know where the door is in town. They don't know when your meetings are because there ain't updated websites and Google listings. They don't know where to find information. Do you have a Facebook? Do you have a Twitter? So once you get that message across, it's been nothing but positive. And they're always excited. When I call, they usually know I've got somebody that's interested in their lodge, and the conversations are always fantastic. I always end up spending an hour on the phone with the master or the secretary every time I call. And
I think too, there's something that first off, I would assume hosts of this show, and also several of the officers at the Grand Lodge level, there's a different personality type, right? Masons aren't all extroverts, right? We don't all do a great job of having these conversations with people. So part of what we wanted to do with the district membership representative is get a guy who's comfortable having those conversations. And Darren, to the point of the lodge secretary, the lodge secretary isn't necessarily required to be an outgoing guy. So one of the things to Victor's point is this: there is somebody in that lodge that probably would be comfortable. A lot of times it's the younger guys, right? It's the newer guys. They've got the more of the energy as they have coming in. So that's a thing. But just having someone that can say, hey, this is what Masonry is. And we don't want to do this whole, well, we take good men and make them better, because that's vague, right? Good men and make them better, that could be a health club. That could be the Marines, right? So we need to kind of give look, this is what Masonry means to me, right? That this is the experience that I've had on it, and the way that it's touched my interests on here. And by the way, that is one narrow segment, right? If you're interested in the history, you could really focus on that. If you're interested in the esoteric side, you can focus on that. If you're interested in the community outreach stuff, there's so many ways that a person can contribute. And the odds are high that one of the guys that a DMR like Victor is going to talk about is going to resonate with one piece of that message over the other. And then they get in, right? Then they go, oh, hey, this esoteric stuff is kind of cool. or the community stuff is kind of cool. And that's how we give them something that they can dig in and get stickier with it, right? Because it's more than just getting them in. Obviously, we want to give them an experience that'll allow them to stick around.
Bill, do you have any questions or observations?
Yeah, I like what I'm hearing. I mean, this is something that has been needed, for a long time now. I remember in Indianapolis, more years than I care to talk about, as they put billboards up all around the outer perimeter of the city. And they set up a special website just to get people to contact them. Well, they had all kinds of responses, but Grand Lodge or nobody ever sent them out to the local lodges. So it's, so this is, and I've heard this lots of times. And I was talking with the Grand Master of Texas last year. Well, he's this year. He was last year. He was, looking to become the Grand Master. And we were talking about something like this. In fact, I wish I'd known about you guys back then. I would have put him in touch with you guys. Well, one of the things, we pretty much was doing the same thing as what you all are doing. The only thing different that I've heard is when they fill out the form and they're given an option of which lodges to petition or, to visit. We talked about giving them like 4 or 5 local lodges within maybe a 20-mile residence. Because, sometimes it's all about the attitude. I was just sitting here thinking about the very first time I ever met the brethren with the lodge that I ended up joining, and I was just a petitioner. And I visited the building, and I walked in, and we were going to have supper, and they were going to have a special event. And he looked at me, an 80-year-old guy. He come up to me and said, I don't know why in the blankety blank you're wanting to join this thing anyway. Masonry is going to be dead in 5 years. And I got to admit, it took me back a little bit. And I thought, it takes a lot for me to stand down. So I want to try it and I'll ride it out. And now that brother's not here, but Masonry still is. And, sometimes it's, not only just the petition, and getting it into the hands of the local lodge, but sometimes it's just the brethren themselves at that lodge. If it's, if you got a 20-year-old young fellow who's interested, but everybody there is, the average age of dead, chances are they're going to be sitting there and they're not going to include him and stuff. And I think that's something we ought to, put into this too, is not only get brethren to the lodge, but talk to the lodges and say, hey, unless you want to, really just go extinct, you're going to have to start thinking about this and, maybe even have like a class for the membership chairman to come in and talk about that. Because I think it's just as important as membership is also retention.
Yep.
And we've had I've seen all kinds of brethren over the years come in and then they run right, they knock on the front door and then after about a week, they run right out the back door.
Yeah.
Right.
And one of the big things, and you bring it up, Bill, is part of my role is making sure that, I had to reach out and get to know members of these lodges. What's the culture in your lodge? Are you guys really interested? You got a lot of guys who fish. You got a lot of guys who hunt. Are you more community orientated? Are you guys more into real deep into Masonic education? Because that's where it gets critical. Because you want to line them up with a lodge that seems to pique their interest. You may not always be 100%, and you may not have an option depending on where we are and, in rural Wisconsin, kind of where I'm at per se. I've got a lodge 20 miles to the southeast. I've got another one 40 miles, 30 miles. So it's a bit of a drive for someone in my area. So once you start talking to these guys, if they're willing to drive, then I will encourage them. You know what? I'm going to send your information off to a couple lodges that I think you really need to take the time and meet these brethren and make sure that the culture is right for you. I don't want you to start a journey and a process that 6 months, a year down the road, you're like, why did I do this? And you felt like you've wasted your time, because if you're truly interested, we want to make this completely valuable. And I think Mike can expand a little bit more on it, but not only is this portion of what we're doing, but on the education side, that's another kind of a multi-prong approach on the retention. It's great to get them in the door, but how do we keep them? And majority of the conversations I have, these men are interested in, how do I become better? How do I get more involved? and you start talking about Masonic education, and you start explaining to them that, yeah, there's the history, here's the esoterics, and they have a drive, they want that. Well, if they want that, the lodge has to have it, and the lodge needs to be informed of it. And we have made tremendous strides on the Masonic education side through our website, a members only area. We're focused on, small little tidbits. If you're an entered apprentice, here's a 6 to 8 minute conversation, and then here's 5 or 6 questions, so I can hammer those things away with you. And then if you want to get a little bit more deeper, maybe we've got a podcast. Further Light, is that correct, Mike?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, Further Light is a Wisconsin Grand Lodge sponsored podcast that is providing our members, a 15-minute clip. And then you can have all the conversation you want. And then you get onto the website, you log in, then there's the Masonic College. You can get into deeper lessons that might be 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and these are self-driven. So it's important that once a guy gets in, like you said, Bill, provide them the things that they need to be there, be it the education, be it they want to be involved, make them a leader, put them in charge, hold them accountable. And that is a message that the Grand Lodge is doing a phenomenal job at here in Wisconsin through the district deputies of, hey, these are the things we need to do to be successful across the spectrum of our state.
I think Victor hits on it pretty well, because if you look at retention, at least as it relates to my opinion and to a lot of the membership committee, retention is, it's more than just keep sending a bill to someone and keep asking them for dues. There is the need to get education and to give them a reason to come back to get that education. Then there is the need to have some activities that are fun. It's not just let's raise guys, let's do some more degrees or something. Let's maybe wire in a little bit with the family, or let's make the dinner that we're doing, the spaghetti dinner, a little bit more entertaining, or let's go out afterwards and do something there. Victor hit on something that's one of my favorite things. Ask the new guy to be the backup chaplain, right? Memorize this prayer, give this charge, learn these different pieces so that they immediately get on the sidelines going, maybe the chaplain's not going to be here. I mean, that is such a crafty thing. That was what the master of the lodge did for me the first year that I was involved was, hey, chaplain sometimes isn't around. Learn the backup prayer, and it did. It immediately made me feel like something was on there. One of the things we have to remember, though, there's something I heard several years ago that sticks in my head, and it really applies to Masonry. Friendship happens on the way to something else, right? So give them the something else. Give them the shared activities, give whatever it is, and then they're coming back for the friendship, right? You'd have to assume sooner or later we'll run out of something to teach them. But if the bond got created, where now they're going there and saying, hey, Bob, it's really great to see you. Let's chat, and you can get those friendships formed. So I think what's really important at the local lodge level is have the officers always greet people, but even more than saying, hey, welcome. You have to say, hey, you're an electrician, right? This guy over here is a plumber. I bet you guys have messed things up together, and chat, So get them to form connections with each other instead of just with the officers. Find some reason to give two guys an opportunity to work together and get those friendships started. That's what I think is underlying a lot of the retention success.
Darren he's actually one of our Grand Lodge area education officers. And I was just curious, Darren, if you had any comments back to especially the point of once they're in the door, because we've talked some about this, about on the retention side and education. Darren, if you had any comments or thoughts.
Yeah, not only am I area education officer, but I also serve on our Grand Lodge Committee for Masonic Education here in the state of Illinois. And I'll tell you, Victor, you guys are light years ahead of where we are currently. You're kind of where we want to be. We're just now, we've had probably pre-COVID, we kind of had a lot of turnover in our head of the state educational effort at the Grand Lodge level. So, and then during COVID, it was just kind of nothing was happening. So we finally, I think, have a very strong committee and we're looking at building out a lot of the things that you mentioned. I think it seems that at least your Grand Lodge is very supportive of educational efforts. At least that's what I'm reading between the lines here. I'm not so sure our Grand Lodge is, and I'll tell you why. I think that it seems to always have been, for whatever reason, but especially since we kind of we've not had a stable leader in the position over the Grand Lodge Committee of Education, that it lost some of the luster. So we're trying to recapture a lot of the Grand Lodge's our Grand Line's attention to, make them aware that education is a huge part of retaining membership. And I often feel that our Grand Lodge is all about recruiting membership and wants to recruit new members, obviously pushing membership, but that we do a very bad job on the back end trying to, retain members. So I guess a question I may have would be, was there like a change in philosophy from your Grand Lodge? Has your Grand Lodge always been supportive of education, or as part of this membership development, you've kind of also hand in hand said, hey, look, we're looking to get these members, but we need this way. We need to also retain them. And this is a path to do that.
So I think Wisconsin leadership at the Grand Lodge level, we've been extremely fortunate from having a string of past masters that recognized the need to establish a strategic plan. And there is a strategic plan in the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin line, right? So it's the thing that everybody could read. And basically what it was, and I'm not sure exactly how many years ago it was put in place, but it's a strategic plan. And what's nice is, as the progressive line of Grand Lodge officers goes through this, they're working on the strategic plan each year. They're refining it, but they're being exposed to it from the top of that progressive line to the bottom of that progressive line. So it's kind of largely built in, and their exposure to it just helps to refine it, but it also, I think, helps to guide their thought and their path. And then that strategic plan, it's pretty obvious. Hey, we need members. Hey, we got to educate these guys. Hey, we have to manage the finances properly. Hey, we have to do all these different things. So when you start getting guys that are coming through that, then they are built in with the appreciation of, let's develop membership, let's educate the members, let's find a way to retain these guys. And then I don't know how significant of a change this was, because some of this occurred prior to me, but I've been in this chair for, 2+ years now. And one of the changes that did occur is that they took the membership chair and the education chair, and they're included in all the staff activities. So when we do quarterly meetings at a Grand Lodge planning level and at a Grand Lodge update level, I'm there and the education chair is there. So we're hearing what is going on and we're delivering what's going on. So we're giving our updates along with everything else, and we're finding ways to make sure that we're wiring these things in. And I think that's a huge reason for this, for a good chunk of the success, was for the progressive line to have had the foresight to do that, to recognize that we need to get these guys, these chairs, a seat at the table. They need to hear what is happening, and we need to hear what they're doing. And so we're held to some accountability to that, because we can't just kind of go, oh, okay, let's meet every month or whatever it is. So from the membership committee, we meet a lot. It's all virtual for the most part until it isn't. But so we have our initiatives. We're just going down the list of trying to take these initiatives down. And I know the education committee is also super active in doing that as well too. And they've really pushed forward and made some good stuff. So I think that's kind of a fundamental reason for some of the success that we're seeing and how we're able to move the needle a little bit more in the last couple of years.
I'm curious, as you look forward, how sustainable are these efforts in the next 3 years, 4 years?
So from a membership standpoint, there were really three things that we're trying to do, right? And then I can address what the sustainability, I think, is. The mission is pretty straightforward. Number one, we have to increase awareness of the real Freemasonry, the real Freemasonry, not the crazy stuff that people are seeing, right? You do the web search and you wind up seeing conspiracy theories and misinformation and all these different things that we supposedly worship and everything else. And my favorite one was the video that shows the secret Masonic handshake exchange between Pope Francis and Nancy Pelosi that has had literally 200,000 views on YouTube. That is my favorite of the crazy that is out there. So as I mentioned before, we just want to be slightly louder than the misinformation and the crazy so that somebody searches Freemasonry. And part of the way we're doing that is we're buying some of the search. So we are paying for some of those Google ads so that we will get at the top or closer to the top than the crazy and the misinformation. So when somebody is searching for Freemasonry or how to become a Mason, they're going to land on our site, and we geographically fence that so that it's in Wisconsin. So we're not taking any of your nice Illinois leads, but we're doing that on increasing the awareness of Masonry, right? So at the Grand Lodge level, it's the website, it's social media, it's the digital and physical and statewide ads. And we don't do billboards, but we do have 9 semis on the road that have this, not just a man, a Mason thing, which is kind of nifty cool. From a local lodge standpoint, how are they going to increase that Freemasonry? Well, they've got their community visibility, their open houses. Any Mason should wear a shirt, a pin, or a hat, and as I say, just get caught being a good guy. So that's the things that they can do at that level. And then once we have that, we just want to extend the invitation and knock on the door. And that's where we've got the web form and have people fill out the web form. And then the last part is follow up effectively. We've been given a gift of someone with interest. Don't screw it up, right? So, and that's where the district membership reps and having the lodges and stuff go. So if we do that and we start looking at the numbers, I tried an experiment with really trying to dig in and look for the numbers. And I'm fairly confident that there is between 2 and 3% of the men that are in the state of Wisconsin that could be my brothers. And I'm not picking that number. Well, I don't know. You can be perfectly exact no matter what you're doing. But Wisconsin is an example. We've got like 5.8, 5.9 million people. Cut that in half. You've got a number of men. You take the men that it's easy enough to find voting men and men over the age of 70 and whatever it is. So we're almost at 2 million men that are within an eligible range in the state of Wisconsin to be a Freemason. But we also know that we have to know that they have a belief in a supreme being, and we have to also know that there's some alignment with their belief structure in their church and whatever they're supporting stuff behind this to have that religious alignment. And Pew Research Forum publishes the survey of how they go off in the interview, and they say, "Oh, okay, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Muslim, I don't have a belief structure, I don't have a whatever." And when you overlay that, you get roughly 30% of the population that have what I would call a religious alignment. They're not way off to the evangelical side where they usually would discourage participation in Freemasonry, and they're not atheists and they're not agnostics or whatever it is. So that represents 30%. Well, once you get that and you do the math, in my state, that's 570,000 guys. So I'm going to assume that if I line 10 of these guys off, that I could resonate with the Freemasonry message with 1 out of 10 of them. Right, so now I'm at roughly 50, high 50,000s on there. I already have 9,000 of those guys that I call brother, right? So that's 48,000 guys left in the state of Wisconsin that I have yet to get a message in front of. And when you do the math on there and you start comparing it to other states, that's 2.5, almost 3% of people. So we got a lot of ocean to boil, I think, at this point. And I think so we can keep doing this for quite a while. And you know, we have, in a sense, a governor on this engine right now. I mean, we don't just blast all these ads out, because we know that even with the pace that we're passing these off to the lodges, it's potentially overwhelming. I mean, we're trying to figure out, how do we do the Masonic Day of Lights? How do we wind up helping lodges that haven't done a degree in a long time do degrees? Or how do you deal with the fact that you might have 10 guys all of a sudden landing in a lodge and a lot of experience that just can't quite put them together. So I think we have headroom on this. I think this headroom goes on for quite a while. And I think success begets success too, because, you know, Victor, I'm sure when you were coming through, there were friends that observed the fun that you're having or the passion that you've got for this. And they're going, hey, I'm curious about this. I want to see this. And then the hand-to-hand combat, as I refer to it, that it stands a better chance.
No, that makes a lot of sense. You make a very important point about, you could pretend you had unlimited funds to do the advertising piece of it. But I think you just hit on something very important too, was even if all that works and you have hundreds of inquiries and then those turn into petitions, there's a capacity governor even at the local level of how, because, let's be honest, most lodges, at least in Illinois, we can't do our own degree work. We have to share people, I'm sure it's the same there. So you're right, there's a capacity limit and a burnout potential, for lodges, which would be an amazing problem to have.
Right.
But
right.
All those things, I think, Mike and Victor, you just hit on something very important, that's, if you think through a membership campaign and then an education campaign, well, the step in between there is making sure you can get the work done, get them raised, and then, and still have the members you did have before, not burn them out and, run them off.
So we're doing something really cool coming up so we've been doing these Masonic Day of Lights, right? This kind of what a lot of states will call batching or the group raising or whatever. And so we've done a number of those using Straight Blue Lodge. But one of the things that is coming up in November is a day of light that's being driven by the Shriners. And the dispensation came through that said, Shriners, you get to wear your hats as you're doing this. So now you got all the Shriners that are very excited of kind of going, oh, hey, we're trying to grow membership too. The more people see the Fez, the more that they potentially get excited on that. And in March of next year, we're setting up to do the same thing with the Scottish Rite guys. So the Scottish Rite guys do their hats. A lot of them have degree teams. I was on a Scottish Rite degree team for a handful of years as well too. So, and now what you get, and this is one of the things I love about doing that at that level, you get guys from individual lodges in a district getting to know each other, right? And I think that's one of the things about the appendant bodies that I like the most is I'm getting exposed now to guys that are in my district that I wouldn't have otherwise hung out with once or twice a month. So I think you can generate a lot of excitement from the appendant bodies in terms of helping the individual lodges start to raise these guys once we get them in.
Bill, why don't we'll just kind of do a few last round of thoughts here and get towards the end of our episode. Bill, what other thoughts or questions, Mike, you have for Mike or Victor?
Well, I was thinking, I've been trying to preach different venues for advertising. So many people say, well, we're on Facebook and we put in a Facebook ad, spent $20 and didn't hear anybody. Well, that's true. But, we got all those crazy videos on YouTube. What if a Grand Lodge were to go up there and make up their own video and say, would you like to know about the real Freemasonry? Not something that you're going to see on this crazy medium. If you're interested, visit grandlodgeofwisconsin.org or whatever. And you could run the same thing on YouTube. You could run it on TikTok, which I did a marketing study about a year or two ago. And that's pretty much most of our target demographic is TikTok these days.
Right.
Our ages is the ones that go to Facebook now, even if that's even still the case. But TikTok is where all the our prospects are. But some of the people I've talked, that doesn't look very good. Well, why? I remember a few years ago, back in the day, when you're on AOL, you can't, it's just. But I think it's a great. But I was also thinking something that I've completely forgotten. Lost my.
Well, as you're thinking that one, I can give you some background on some of those different pieces of content. So the low hanging fruit was to use the beafreemason.org videos, and we leverage those heavily. One of the things that I'm preaching, I got invited to speak in front of the Cogman of the Council of Grand Masters and the Masonic Renewal Committee and whatever it is. I'm very much interested in trying to get a cross-jurisdictional group. There isn't a reason why the Illinois, at least I wouldn't think why the Illinois version of what a Freemason really is should be all that much different than the Wisconsin one. Maybe we have a different logo that winds up in the back of it, or maybe we catch a different kind of fish or something. But I think there's an opportunity for us to continue to use this grouping of creating content that we can do it and play it at a local level, but still generate it in a more cost-effective way by doing it together. I like the TikTok idea. One of the things that we do is we have the interstitial ads, the pre-rolls or the intermediate rolls for YouTube. So we do have those that we tuck into the demographic that we're aiming at. one of the things that we've also are experimenting with is what's known as OTT, over-the-top ads, which are the ones that are very hyper-targeted for people that are doing streaming of like Hulu and such like that, so that we can tuck, again, one of those little 15-second or 30-minute content information things in front of that. And then, of course, we've got the web ads that are showing up, as you're searching for something, that those are showing in there. There's so many opportunities for us to drop that message in front of people. But yeah, Bill, I love the idea, and I think, we had a conversation recently in the membership committee about using Reels, which is one of the Facebook, I guess probably competitor to TikTok, might be a way to say it if you're not familiar with it. But I think it's a great opportunity, Bill.
Yeah, I was actually thinking also about the streaming services too. I forgot to mention that, but Reels is a grand idea. Anything that you could actually post a link on and make it go right directly to your membership page. And I remember another thing I was thinking too is we do have the problem with the overcapacity and such. But there's a way to cure that if we were to actually decide to cut through the Masonic red tape and actually use common sense for once.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you.
Yeah. Why don't, I don't know how many in Wisconsin it takes to start a new lodge, but start adding new lodges to the thing. In England, if you have a lodge over 35, they tend to break that off when they start going to and they can have affinity lodges. Chris Hodap's been on that for years. He's been trying to get a pipe smoking lodge for I don't know how long.
Ooh, I'd go to that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of those. In England, they have them for soccer. They have them for people in show business. There's all these different things you could do. But, each one of those, especially if they're young guys, they might actually like the idea of doing degree work and, put them to it. So, instead of having one lodge in a 40-mile area, I mean, let's face it, brethren, you've got a Masonic temple that it's there 7 days a week, but you may only use it one night a month. Right. And so you could go up there and you could have as many lodges as you could think about. Plus, if you got a brother or a potential petitioner that says, well, I'd love to do it, but I work second shift or I work third shift. I'm sleeping about that time. Well, here's a great thing. We have what they call a daylight lodge. It's right there in your area. I mean, you see, those are the things we don't really think about. We got one lodge, we got one building, we use it twice a month, then we have our bean supper. How much of that resources are we just throwing away for no reason at all? But I think between all that and the way you guys are doing, I think you've got a great idea, and I hope you keep expanding it and keep preaching it to the other Grand Lodges.
Thanks.
Darren, any last thoughts or questions for Mike or Victor?
No, I really like the idea, Mike, of doing something cross-jurisdictional, just because you guys are F and AM and we're AF and AM shouldn't matter at the end of the day, right? I think that there seems to be, just my senses in this conversation is that your Grand Line is very much more strategically aligned to what the future of Wisconsin Freemasonry should be. And I've always felt like in Illinois that we seem to just kind of change identities as the Grand Master changes, that the Grand Master will come in and have his strategic plan, but there's no overall 5-year, 10-year plan for, what they want Freemasonry to be in the state of Illinois. And I think that hurts us. So I think not only, could we have so much to learn, I think, from you guys, but also I would hope that maybe they could look at some of what, your Grand Line's best practices are and maybe also try to adopt those as well. So those are my final thoughts. I will just thank you both right now for coming on and spending some time with us. I greatly appreciate it.
Very much my pleasure.
So thank you.
And I would say, Darren, why reinvent the wheel? And organizations are notorious for that, and share those best practices because we all have the same goal at the end of the day in our organization. So I think you hit it right on the head.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, it boggles my mind sometimes just why we have to make things that seem so simple so difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. And I would say there's some of that cross jurisdictional things that happen because I reached out to you guys. The Working Tools podcast, I've chatted with those guys. We've got Robert Johnson coming up to our lodge here in Wautoma on the 22nd of August to do a speaker for one of our scholarship events. There's a few of us members that are looking to actually come down to Illinois as well. I think there's a few of you in Robert Johnson's lodge as well, if I recall. So we're looking to come down at some point from Wautoma, a few of us, and I know Jason Laramie from our Wisconsin Education Committee. He's been down there a couple times as well. So I think we're doing it because of the medium that we have with the internet, and hopefully that drives that passion that we can start to inject that from a multifaceted approach.
Yeah,
I'll have to. I'm sorry, Greg. I was going to say we'll have to talk to RJ to see when he's going up, and maybe we meet up and do a field trip.
Yeah. That's, I was thinking in Illinois, it's primary election day, and I won't get into political candidates, but I've been amazed how those candidates, I mean, I can't get away from them. They're on every single electronic platform I could come up with. They've found me, the governor candidates, doesn't matter what it is, they've done it. And sometimes I wonder, I don't want to talk to them about politics, but they sure know how to reach people. And there's probably, some of the stuff, Mike, you were talking about and how we do that. There's best practices out there. Maybe we just need to collectively, like you say, go do a little bit more of them. But I think the most important thing you both said as we started this conversation tonight was kind of the why. And you both want more brothers. And that's, as we tie all this stuff together, that's the why part. And that's the important part. The education is part of that why, but that's not, why you should come to lodge. It's part of it, but it is the one-to-one friendships and other things that you do develop through the camaraderie and the shared experiences that we have, not only through the degrees, but all the kinds of various activities that we do after the fact. And I think that's important, and we could do 10 episodes on some of my other rantings, but we're building community. I think our society needs us more now than ever. I think they need the values and those that we should exhibit day to day. You see it in the media and other places. Maybe people are less than civil to each other and things like that. And we can be a shining example as an organization and as individuals in our communities to help improve society. And to me, that's sort of like the tail end of the why. And that's why it's always been, since I've been in here and since 2007, that's motivated me partially to try to improve, to maybe be examples to others to get them in our lodges. So
mote it be.
Again, thank you both very, very much. Yeah. Thank you both very much. It's a real privilege. Hopefully we'll get to run across you since you're our neighbor to the north, just a ways.
I'd like that. That would be good.
Love to. Yeah. Again, small world there. Mike and I were in that class in Cleveland together for the Supreme Council. And again, it's just funny how your paths in life can cross just, these various ways, either electronically or in person. So thank you both very much. We thank everybody that listened into this episode and hope you learned something. If you did, talk to your Grand Lodge about this program. I'm sure Mike and Victor and others from Grand Lodge, Wisconsin would be glad to talk to you, because all you need is that spark of interest, and you can be the one that helps put this together for your lodge and bring in more brothers to help answer that why. So thank you again, everybody, and please join us again for another exciting episode of Meet, Act, and Part.
Thank you for listening to Meet, Act, and Part. For more information about our show, visit our website at www.meetactandpark.com. While there, please consider supporting the show by sponsoring us on Patreon. Until we meet again, may we meet, act and park.